Hello and welcome to Keep Right On, a Birmingham City podcast brought to you from us here at Birmingham Live. I'm Brian Dick, and as ever, I'm joined by my colleague and co-host Alex Dicken. And the observant amongst you will have noticed that there's a third person on this podcast. It is none other than, can we call him a celebrity fan, Alex? Celebrity blues fan, Ian Danter. Ian, how are you? Thanks very much for joining us.
I'm not comfortable with the word celebrity at all. I don't think that wouldn't stand up in court. It wouldn't, but thank you.
No, inevitably when content gets a little bit tight and the summer rolls on, at some point we'll roll out our version of celebrity Birmingham City fans. I'm just wondering if you make the cut, Dance.
Well, not for me to judge, really. I would say
No.
at this point, that's for those to judge.
Let's say we celebrate you anyway. Yeah, most of you will know. I'll give you a proper intro now, Dan. Slightly less irreverent. Ian is obviously well known as a blues fan, but even better known as a football commentator and broadcaster with talkSPORT. He's very kindly agreed to join us today to talk about his time at talkSPORT, his observations. His experience as a blues fan and a broadcaster. So I'll stop wittering and we'll get on with it. Alex?
Yeah. Well, Ian has been in the press box a few times this season, haven't you? I think, and a lot of the games in the previous season, the Championship. Obviously, contrasting seasons. Talk to us about this season, Ian. What have you made of it?
It's been a delight. It's been an absolute delight. Just regardless of anything else, regardless of points totals and records being broken, which obviously have happened, but it's just seeing smiles on faces once again as you walk around the club and just seeing that assured nature of people who work as staff there, you know, knowing that the club is finally back in good hands. I was there for the first time this season for the Fulham Cup tie, where Jay scored, ironically, and then either played possum brilliantly with us pitch side afterwards when he said, there was no way he was leaving. He was staying at Fulham, fighting for his place, all that, and then not 48 hours later he's gone. But before the game, Dale Moon, the press officer, very kindly gave me a guided tour of the capital investment that had been put in on the cop stand side that I hadn't seen. You guys had seen it, but I'd not seen it. I was blown away, absolutely blown away. And that's just capital investment. And I hadn't even seen what they'd done with the training ground and the development centre at Wootton Wall. And, and I'm just thinking, well, if this is what they've done at St Andrews, I can only imagine the quality of work that's gone in to improve the facilities for the players day in, day out. And I'm thinking immediately, okay, they understand what's required here, because simple things like getting hot water back in the toilets. Incredible to think that things were in such a state of disrepair and lack of love. Doesn't take much, does it? I guess it started with the street food, didn't it, guys? That sort of idea of having slightly more different food outlets in and around the stadium, and it's just grown and grown. And a night like the Newcastle night, the cup tie, when the eyes of the country on us on mainstream television, and we've got the fireworks going off, and we've got the atmosphere, and we've got a goal like Iwata scored. There you go. That's a really good way to sum up the progress that Birmingham City have made as a club in pretty short order.
Yeah, we probably don't talk about the improvements kind of inside the stadium enough, do we, really? Ian just mentioned the stuff outside the street food. That's been coming in for a few years. But then when I think back to going to Gary Monk's unveiling on the cop side with you, Brian, a few years ago, the room we were in was literally just like kind of a few tables, white cloths and blue carpets, wasn't it? And that's kind of what it was like throughout the stadium. And now you go over there and there's like 5 or 6 different themed places that fans can go for hospitality pre-match. And it's no wonder they're making an absolute killing financially from it.
Yeah, indeed. And Dance, you've just mentioned the Newcastle game there. I see there'd been 3 or 4 times this season where I've been at St Andrews, and it's I thought, wow, I've not seen scenes like this for a long time. The Newcastle game was one of them. The Bradford City Virtue Trophy semi-final was another one. The Mansfield game was another one. And those are just the ones off the top of my head. To see St Andrews is the heart of Birmingham City, and to see it beating and just absolutely, it's heaving, isn't it? It really is. It's just joyful.
I was lucky enough to be there for the Bradford game. I was commentating on that for talkSPORT 2 for that semi-final. And yes, I felt the hairs rising on the back of my neck. Hearing that version of Keep Right On, which has now become sort of part and parcel of the build-up, where it's sung in a much lower register, and somehow it means more. It's really hard to describe, but when you hear it sung in that low register and it builds and builds, boy, that's good stuff. I think the first sign I saw let's be fair, there were sellouts towards the end of last season when Gary Rowett was manager, and the effort was being made by the supporters to get us over the line, and our home form was terrific. But I think that Scott Wright late winner against Wigan, I think the limbs in the Tilton end that day for what was such a late dramatic winning goal sort of said to me, looking on as an observer, okay, we're up for this in a way that lots of other clubs, fans of other clubs and pundits thought we wouldn't be.
Yeah. Just on that, 111 points. Alex and I have kicked around the idea all season that, Chris Davies has, got the riches that have been bequeathed to Chris Davies are like nothing else in League One. We've been saying, is it par or is it still brilliant because it's record breaking? I think we err towards the latter, don't we? Because you can't do any better than anything anyone's ever done before. What are your thoughts, Dance? How's Chris Davies done with that legacy?
I'm right with you. I've joked on air because I've suffered the sarcasm from fellow presenters on talkSPORT about we bought the league. So I've kind of joined in with them just to sort of take the wind out of their sails. Almost, yeah, we bought the league. We couldn't quite buy the cup, but yeah, it's an astonishing achievement because history is littered with teams that have dropped down to League One from the Championship, maybe haven't spent proportionately quite what Birmingham City have spent, but nevertheless spent a lot thinking, yeah, we'll get back first time of asking, and it's nowhere near happened. Never mind, they've narrowly missed out. They've got nowhere near it. So to see Birmingham do what we did, the style in which we did it wasn't kick and rush, was it? It wasn't, bullish up and under football. It was, lots of passing, lots of possession, lots of understanding, lots of patience, incredible amount of patience at times, depending on the team we were playing, particularly at home. I think it's naive to look at that and say anything other than that's brilliant. Par would have been, I don't know, what would par have been? Maybe getting close to Reading's total or something like that, or maybe even less, 100 points. I don't know. We may never see this again in English League football in our lifetime, that we see that sort of points total accrued. So, no, I won't have it any other way than it was a quite sensational achievement from all concerned. And I don't just mean Chris and the players. I'm talking Craig Gardner as a technical director. I'm talking Tom Wagner. I'm talking the board, Knighthead, the fans, the staff. It struck me that the collective effort of everybody throwing their weight behind this idea, right, let's be irritated by the fact that we're back at this level and let's get out of here and do it in style. We did it in style.
You made a point there about patience, and I think you're talking about the patience that Blues played with. One thing that really struck me last season, even in the 0-0s and when Blues are playing out from the back, was the patience of supporters. Are you surprised by how quickly they've got on board with it, this new style of play? Because when it's happened in the past, they haven't always, there's been jitters when, it was John Ruddy and Emmanuel Ivey playing out from the back, not just, in the Tilton, but also in the press box.
I just had a flashback then, Alex. Don't do that.
Well, Yeah, but I think everybody could see that the players that had been brought in, Alex, could keep the ball and were not likely to give up possession in silly areas, by and large. It probably happened. I mean, there were moments where the passing out from the back didn't work, and we did give away goals and give away chances. It was by no means perfection, but I think the fans, bearing in mind that stat that's been trotted out in recent times, that no club had lost more football matches in the previous 5 seasons than we had. Once the fans got used to the idea, okay, this is winning football early on. Okay, let's be patient. Let's give this style of football its head. Let's give it its chance to prove itself to us. And of course, over the course of the season, it more than proved itself. So yeah, I think the fans were just ready to see something that actually had some structure, because Gary did his best actually last season, and Tony, but at other times the structure in Birmingham's football was completely absent.
44 wins from 60 games, a nice antidote to all those defeats that have gone before it. Ian, when did it all start for you? When was the first game?
It would have been December 1974. So I would have been 6 years of age. I'm a third, fourth generation Blue Nose. My dad, my granddad were big Blue Noses. My granddad worked at Longbridge. He was a shop steward. My dad could have played cricket for Warwickshire, actually. He very nearly made it into the Warwickshire first 11, my dad, in the late 50s. But there was no real money in it. He had to make that decision about whether to have a job or try and forge a career in cricket. And I guess when you're up against Dennis Amiss, you decide, okay, maybe I'm not going to get that much regular cricket. So he went into work instead at GKN. That was where my dad ended up. But I went to that game against Stoke City. It was being televised. Star Soccer would have shown it the next day on ATV. And I was given a very early lesson in what it's like to be a Blue Nose, in that Jimmy Greenoff, who we just sold to Stoke, came back and scored 2 goals. We were 3-0 down at half-time. So what a perfect introduction to being a Blue Nose, that the law of the X should strike on my very first visit. But I have vivid memories of the smells, the cigarette smoke hanging in the air, the onions from the concession stalls, the sort of haziness around the pitch because of that cigarette smoke, the colours so vivid, the blue of Birmingham, the red and white of Stoke. I was sat in the main stand that day with my dad and my granddad, and I think 1 or 2 of my brothers came with me. So yeah, that was my first visit to St Andrews, and you do fall in love. As soon as you see that pitch, you do fall in love.
The main stand probably hasn't changed since, has it?
Well, they've tried.
Yeah, indeed. What did Dick Smith say? We're not going in under that girl, or something like that. Was that something that he said, Alex? Did Jimmy Greenoff celebrate? Can you remember scoring against his old side?
Not. I mean, of course, we're in the era now where nobody dares celebrate. Yeah. I think, but then celebration wasn't really a thing in the 1970s. It wasn't. There were just lots of handshakes, weren't there? You just you stuck the ball away from 25 yards with a gorgeous volley, just shook the hand of your teammate and paced back to the halfway line, ready for the game to restart. So no, I don't remember being anything particularly mad in terms of celebrating. Yeah. No. You'd have to check the footage out on YouTube. I bet it's up there with Hugh Johns providing fantastic commentary as he did in those days. But yeah, the perfect introduction, as I say.
Yeah, indeed. What's been the highlight, Dance?
Oh well, you can't get past Wembley in 2011, can you? I mean, it's impossible to not look past that. It's too obvious to go down that route, and we all have our own peculiar memories of that day, and mine would actually be wishing that my granddad and dad had been there to see it, because both of them had, passed away. My dad only 3 years before that victory. In terms of other moments as a Blues fan before I became a broadcaster, I always think about the game against Brentford in 1995 when we were 2 days after we'd won the auto windscreens.
Yeah.
At Wembley, and Brentford were vying with us for the title to get back to what is now the Championship. St Andrews was as busy as I remembered it being since the reconstruction of the Cop and the Tilton stands, and I was about level with the 18-yard line in the Cop stand by the Tilton end when Kevin Francis stuck away the opening goal, and I think did his knee ligaments as he scored it. I think he came off not long after, and then Liam Daish with a header from a Jonathan Hunt corner. We won 2-0. I think the only downside was Dave Barnett might have done his cruciates that night, really serious injury at the back. But other than that, that was just a joyous, joyous night when it looked like, that's it. We're as good as up. I think we had a home game against Bradford next where we couldn't score. Where if we'd won, we'd have been up. But then we went to Huddersfield and did the job. That Brentford game sticks in my mind. And the Ipswich semi-final on that rutted peat bog of a pitch in 2001, which again was one of the greatest atmospheres I can ever remember. I was in the main stand that night. I managed to snag a couple of tickets last minute. And that was a brilliant atmosphere. And Ipswich fans, in fairness to them, contributed to that atmosphere. They were brilliant. And who can forget the Enkelman game? I was on the Tilton end that night. I'd got tickets through BRMB to go there. I wasn't commentating, and I felt that stand shake. No wonder it had structural problems years down the line, because that Enkelman moment and then the Horsfield goal not long after, that stand bloody shook. So those are some moments apart from the obvious ones that stick in my mind.
Yeah. That sorry, Alex. That League Cup run which culminated in Cardiff in 2001 and lost to Liverpool. There was something special about that, because I was there for the Newcastle game, which I think was a couple of rounds earlier as well. And there was, hearing the Blues fans just give a hoo to Alan Shearer when he came off, it was just brilliant. And it was a time when Trevor was in charge, and it just felt like that season I thought they were going to kick through the glass ceiling. And it was
Trevor did too. I mean, how close Trevor got with all those penalty shootouts and against Watford and Preston and things like that, and coming up against a Barnsley side in the playoffs who just tore us to shreds at St Andrews. But there wouldn't have been a Birmingham fan alive that didn't want it for Trevor. Never mind for themselves. They just wanted success for him. And I think history looks favourably on what Trevor did for the club as a manager, despite not succeeding in what was his ultimate quest. Certainly, when you look at the records of managers that followed on, further down the line, once we got to the more recent history, then Trevor's record is up there with anybody's, I think.
The running order is making me ruin this moment of joy and say, what's the low light in? What's been the worst?
The penalty shootout against Watford in the playoffs. I was working the tannoy that night. So what was that? 98, 99, I think. Horrible, deflating feeling of going out in the playoffs. The playoffs is the best and the worst in both instances. It can be joyous and you can feel utterly crestfallen. I have to think back to some of the unsavoury stuff. A riot against Stoke City fans around the turn of the 90s, which was horrific. I don't particularly want to talk in too much detail about that. It was just horrible. I remember I used to park my car on Prince Albert Street, just down the road, and walk to the stadium from there. And we had a cup game. I think it was a cup game against West Ham, and there was rioting there that night. And I was trying to get back to my car, and I nearly got mown down by a police horse that came round the corner. Oh my God! running battles in the streets, all sorts of stuff, just horrific things. Those are the things I want to forget. And here we are, is an anniversary of the not just the Bradford fire, but the young boy that was killed at St Andrews with the rioting with the Leeds fans. And I remember being on the cop stand with my dad, and we were looking at the programme, and we said, it's Leeds last day of the season. Do you want to go? And I said, no, Dad, I don't want to go. I don't know how old I would have been, 85. So I would have been 16. And I said, no, Dad, I don't want to go. I just get the feeling it's going to be trouble. And so it was. So those are the things that stick in my mind as lowlights, because it just, every club's got them. Every club's got their element of troublemakers. And thankfully, these days, by and large, it's not so front and center as it certainly was in the 1980s, when it was, you could not avoid it wherever you went. There was violence, and there was firms, and there was just the most awful atmospheres around football stadiums. So that's the low light stuff. That's the stuff that I wish never happened.
I'm going to raise the mood again now, and we'll talk about all the managers. And there's been enough of the managers over the last 10 years at least. Who's the best? Who's the worst? Who do you remember fondly?
Well, I think, Freddie Goodwin could have won us something. Obviously, he got us to an FA Cup semi-final, and that was one of my dad's worst memories. I had no real concept of what it meant to get as far as we did in that FA Cup 74-75 when we lost to Fulham in that replay, and it was seconds away from a second replay. So Freddie Goodwin was a great manager. Jim Smith, the irony of all ironies is Jim was the manager that sold Trevor Francis to Nottingham Forest. And with the money that we received, we bought some brilliant players: Colin Todd, Archie Gemmell, Frank Worthington, Dave Langan. And the irony of that is, if we'd bought those players and kept Francis, we might have won something then. But I guess I'm being a bit selfish, because we'd had 9 years of Trevor by that point, and to get 9 years out of a player like that is just so special. Worst managers. Rooney and Zola, just the win rate percentage. I think Zola was probably a little unlucky at times. Wasn't there some stat about how often we hit the woodwork when Zola was manager, and how trying to hit the bar of the post? But Rooney, I'm sorry, I'm not having the narrative that his friends will push through in their highfalutin podcasts and sort of enable him to say, not my fault, Gov. It was your fault. And the Plymouth job has proved it, because he had a pre-season with those guys and it still didn't work. So don't be coming to me with they wanted me to change the style of play and then they sacked me on January the 1st. Adapt and survive. So that rubbed me up the wrong way. Yeah. That as soon as he'd been dismissed, he's going on Match of the Day and panels and saying, Birmingham fans never really wanted me from the start and things like that. And I'm thinking, yes, they did. They were singing your name, but pretty much every away game, I think, apart from the Middlesbrough game, I think you were probably there that night up at the Riverside. I think there was that maybe where things properly turned against him. But no, there were fans that wanted you to succeed, Wayne, and you patently didn't.
Yeah, the fan one always got to me, because Blues fans really got behind him. Probably gave him more slack than they should. In the first 10 games, I think he lasted 15, didn't he? But by the end, it was only really that final game where they properly went for him. And,
that's because we trusted what Knighthead were doing. We were upset to lose John, but we thought, okay, there's a method to this, so let's give this new idea an opportunity to bear fruit. And obviously it didn't. And, it ultimately led to what was you could say a necessary relegation, having trod water and circled the plug hole for as long as we did. Relegation, in some regards, actually allowed us to spend the money that we would not have been allowed to spend had we remained a championship club for the postseason a year ago. So, every cloud and all that, but what a cloud.
Yeah, three championship relegations on the CV with 440 is probably not the best start to a managerial career.
Alex, are you proud of how I'm managing myself here? Regular listeners to this podcast will know that this is a particular bugbear of mine, and I'm not going to go down, not going to repeat myself again and again. But yeah, I agree with everything you said there, Dance. Everything, and people will know how I felt about that appointment and the excuses that have come since.
I've never booed a manager. I've only ever booed a player once. I don't understand, but we've had all this thing with Trent Alexander-Arnold at Anfield on Sunday. Don't get it.
Who was the player, Ian?
It was Paul Furlong. And the reason I booed him is because Trevor substituted him in a game against West Brom, and he took his shirt, his Blues top off, and threw it down next to Trevor as he stormed down the tunnel. And I thought that was disrespect to, the shirt. And I booed him for that. And I told him that some years later when I met him. And he apologised and said he understood why I felt that way. It was a heat of the moment thing, blah, 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 blah. That's the only time I've ever booed a player. As my old boss, Tom Ross, used to say, if you're going to boo your team, why not stick the opposition scarf and hat on whilst you're at it?
Dance, we talked about your experiences with Blues managers and players. Obviously, you've been working in the industry for decades. Talk about some of the characters and the most memorable exchanges or the most uncomfortable exchanges that you've had in outside of the Birmingham City Church.
I found, and I'm playing to the galleries here, but I found David O'Leary to be the rudest, most condescending and patronising manager I've ever interviewed. And lots of people will share that opinion. He was regularly rude in post-match press conferences with no reason to be. I'm not, and the colleagues who were around me were not the kind to ask unnecessary, spiky or controversial questions. He was just rude, and I won't ever forget it. There's colleagues of mine that have written him letters saying, have I done something wrong? What have I done to offend you? Because they have no idea why he was being the way he was with them. And, well, look, this isn't a podcast about that lot down the road, so let's not go there. But let's just say he is right up there. Ian Holloway sticks out in my mind as somebody who I had a bit of a row with once when he was Blackpool manager and he made 10 changes for a game across the expressway, and I challenged him on that, and he went for me, but he apologised 2 days later. But I also remember him in the tunnel, just outside the press room at St Andrews, when Birmingham had handed Blackpool their backsides in a great performance, and we're talking to Ian in that little area just outside the press room door in the tunnel. You know where it is, boys. And Barry Ferguson walks past. He's got his toilet bag and he's obviously heading back to the car park. And Ian Holloway stops the interview, said, hang on, lads. And he turns to Barry Ferguson. Can I just say, that's one of the best central midfield performances I've seen in 25 years of being in and around this game. That was sensational, son. Well played. Shook his hand. And, Barry suddenly rose about 3 foot as he carries to walk down the tunnel. Ian is a lovely guy who I got off on the wrong foot with once, but then I realised just how incredibly much he loves the game and everything to do with it. He's a top fella, and I'm glad to see that he turned Swindon Town around the way he has this season. So there's two examples of the good and the bad.
You obviously had a lot of co-com as well, haven't you, Ian? Working for talkSPORT and other radio stations. Boy. Who's I don't know if I want you to say who's the worst co-com because they might not get any more work. But no. Who's the best?
Well, yeah, I work with so many. Sometimes I'm the talkSPORT guinea pig where I'm given a pundit to work with for the first time. I will say Jason Tyndall came to do a game with us once at Wickham, not long after him and Eddie had been let go at Bournemouth. And he was Johnny Tightlips. He wasn't giving anything away. He was very circumspect in what he said. He was obviously, trying to be as diplomatic as he could about everything. And that probably didn't help his cause. But I regularly do work with some brilliant pundits. I have a lot of fun with Perry Groves. He's my regular wingman when I'm doing Premier League games and EFL. And he's great fun. They all do their homework. Let's put it that way. All of the pundits I work with, Adrian Clark, who's a regular EFL commentator, very knowledgeable about around the grounds. He's brilliant, does lots of work. David Connolly used to be brilliant. Now, he doesn't work so much for us at talkSPORT. He works for our international service, but he was always obscenely well prepared for games and had lots of stuff. Courtney Sweetman-Kirk, who I work with a lot, she's fantastic. Again, brilliantly prepared. Matt Holland, who I've worked at World Cups with, what a brilliant bloke and what a great pundit to work with. They've all got their own little individual idiosyncrasies, and what you have to do as a commentator is lock in with those individuals and what works for them. There are some pundits where you think, okay, let's not have too much fun with them at their expense because they're not going to like that very much. Others, you can go, right, Perry and I, we can have some fun, especially when he goes back to Southampton where, he's not a legend there, even though he actually wore the shirt, but he actually plays up to that. So that's the quality of pundits is uniformly really, really, really good. But you still have to adjust your game as a commentator to get the best out of them, if that makes any sense.
I was going to say, when you mentioned Tyndall not wanting to give much away, probably because he had his eye on going back into coaching.
Yeah, fresh out of a job, so he's just protecting himself.
Yeah, do you think they can mix? Because you don't often, the best pundits are pundits, aren't they? And obviously the best coaches are coaches and aren't out of work that often. The only one I can think of who maybe does both quite well is someone like Thomas Frank, who in the summer will go and do a major tournament and be excellent on TV, and yet obviously has a very good career in Brentford as well.
Yeah. Well, Thomas Frank is one of the most erudite speakers in the game. You interview him, you come away from that interview thinking, wow, I've learned something there about the game. And wow, I mean, what more could you ask of a manager? And what it must be for his players, I guess, to listen to a guy like that. Because you do come away from Thomas Frank interviews thinking, well, okay, I learned this or I learned that. It's that's no mean feat, particularly for gnarly old folks like me and Brian, your present company accepted, Alex, who've been in the game a long time and think, well, we don't think we know all there is to know, but it's nice to be educated in a way that you haven't been before once in a while.
It's nice to hear something different, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because nine interviews out of 10 with managers will be painting by cliche, won't they?
Yes.
But you are right in Thomas Frank. He's thought provoking, definitely.
Yeah, and he's got a bubbly, lively personality with it. They'd gone through that spate, Brentford, early in the season where they were scoring lots of early goals, and they did so at Tottenham. And I asked him after, "Have you employed a kickoff coach?" And he laughed his head off. But then he went into detail about starts and restarts, which is something that Graham Taylor used to talk about all those years ago. And it was really, really fascinating to listen to. Off the back of a jokey question, he actually gave me some insight, which made me appreciate him even more.
Yeah, I don't think you can ever underestimate the level of detail that the successful coaches go into. We've seen that with Chris Davies, haven't we? And I've told this story before, but go back to the media day last summer when Chris Davies is just sort of relatively fresh into the place, and he comes over to the press pack for the open training session and explains with a clipboard what they're working on, and it was one phase of the game, which was getting back into position to receive the ball to play out, wasn't it? It was absolute minute detail. And yeah, it's it's knowing how much to look for that when you're watching the game, because it's nerdy, granular detail that some people will find really interesting, and other people will be like, "Oh, I want to hear about the spectacle. I want to hear about the product." Sort of thing.
I can appreciate it can be a turn off for some people, and analysis can send people one of two ways half the time. But for people like me, you are looking for, okay, what makes this team unique? What makes this team different? And I'd met Chris once before. He actually came out to do media duties when he was Brendan's assistant at Leicester, and they'd won a game at Millwall, and Brendan wasn't doing postman. I think he was poorly or something like that. So Chris came out in his stead. And I remember interviewing him and thinking afterwards, all right, that you've got something about you. And I don't know whether you make a direct correlation between Chris leaving Tottenham Hotspur and Spurs' subsequent travails under Ange Postecoglou having anything to do with Chris's absence. Maybe that's too easy a thing to draw, but clearly from what you're saying to me, you've learned a lot from Chris with the many times that you've interviewed in pre and post match, as I like to do from the managers, because obviously I don't get to interview the same manager week in, week out like you guys have the good fortune to do. I'm meeting different managers every week. Some impress me, some don't. And Thomas Frank's right at the top of that list of those who I speak to regularly who impress me. But Chris is up there too.
I remember when I first started, it's not that long ago, it's only like 9 years ago, but, you'd ask a manager a question and some would almost frown upon on a tactical question and kind of be like, why are you asking me that? Whereas the modern day manager, coach, someone like Chris Davies, if you give them that question, they're prepared for it and they're ready to kind of show off in their answer. And that's the most impressive thing for me, that they can just kind of articulate all that message and make you think a little bit differently about the game.
I think it's probably a generational thing too, in terms of the younger coaches are far more prepared and willing to go deeper into the tactical side of things and give you the answers that you would want to that sort of question, rather than beat around the bush as other managers might have done, or might have seen you as being cheeky for daring to ask that question. You can tell from the interviews that you guys give with people like Chris, who obviously has served his apprenticeship as an assistant and has built up his coaching portfolio through the sessions he's done, through the drills he's done, through the people he's worked with, like Brendan, like Ange. So he's got a basis from which to work, and then he surrounds himself, obviously, with like-minded people in his coaching staff. What it must be for the midfielders to work with somebody like Tom Huddleston, somebody who can strike a ball so sweetly. And we've seen it from his career. I remember him coming through at Derby County as a 15, 16-year-old. But these are the things that, tactically players must soak up like a sponge. It must be fantastic. And, Chris is front and centre in that. And it's brilliant to see. Brilliant to see.
Obviously, listeners to talkSPORT you may bridle at this a little bit, Dance, but they will equate the station with the voice of Simon and opinions of Simon Jordan.
Yes.
Now, most Blues fans will have a certain opinion of Simon Jordan, largely being that he doesn't like Birmingham City. Whether it stems back to the garden leaf stuff with Steve Bruce,
of course it does,
or 25 years ago, or whatever it was. Is it real, or is it just a personality he adopts for the stage? Or talk us through your relationship with Simon Jordan.
Well, Simon is very erudite and makes his points in a very wordy way. And look, it works for him. I've found the best way to deal with that as a guest on the show is to be as wordy with him as he is with you. When it comes to what the things he says about, I did that pre-season chat with him that I know you guys know about, where I said that for a lot of teams, Birmingham City would be their cup final. And you could see him bristling at that and turning his nose up at that comment, and just looking to be deliberately confrontational. I think the psychologist Jonathan Miller called it a performative utterance. And I think there's a degree of that going on in broadcasting everywhere these days. The performative utterance. YouTubers, watch-along merchants, fan TV stations seem to deal exclusively in these performative utterances, which you could regard as clickbait, you could regard as being deliberately confrontational. I actually had more of a beef. I mean, what Simon says about us, water off a duck's back to me. It may well stem from taking Steve Bruce from Crystal Palace, because I remember Palace were at Walsall the night that story broke, and he actually conducted an interview pitch side at the Bescot, holding court and answering questions for a good 20-25 minutes, just about how angry he was at the way that Birmingham had handled it, and it was, there was legal ramifications and blah 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 blah. And I would imagine that some of his beef with us stems from that. But he has been complimentary about us too during the course of the season. Blink and you'd have missed it, but he has been complimentary about Birmingham City. He has said nice things. I actually had more of a beef with him when we were talking about Luke Littler winning the darts. It was the day after the final at Ali Pali where Luke was world champion. Jim White chimes in with what about the people who say that darts isn't a sport? And I come back with, oh, right, should we stop having it on talkSPORT then, Jim, darts, seeing as it's not a sport? And then Simon, leaping to the defense of his chum, says, well, it's not a sport. We all know that 90% of professional darts players are fat. I said, no, you can't say that. Luke Humphreys isn't fat. Dimitri van den Berg isn't fat. And he wouldn't have it. He was just pushing on 90% of darts players are fat. Look at Luke Littler. Well, yes, Luke is not a slim Jim. No, but to trot out as 90%, it's ludicrous, and it's You see what I mean? It's performative. It's not done with any thought, but because it's done with his style of delivery, somehow it's supposed to take on more importance. No, it doesn't. Something that's factually incorrect is still factually incorrect, even if you're using received pronunciation. Simon's, he's done great things for the station, and the listening figures speak for themselves about what he's done for mid-mornings in that time slot. And yet he has been nice about Birmingham, and he's been nice about Wrexham, and he's the backhanded compliments have been there. Let's have it right. But there have been times where he's been a little over the top, but not to the extent that I get irritated by it and I want to tweet it out all the time and respond to everything he says and point the finger and go, no, it's like that meme you see. What is it? It's possible that you can see something on the internet that you disagree with, and you can just scroll down and move on with your life, rather than having to be, controversial and being conflicting and being confrontational in everything that you do. It must be exhausting to be like that. Absolutely exhausting to be that way in life.
You should try reading Alex's player ratings every Saturday.
Well, I would. Yeah, that's a slippery slope, that, Alex. Just give everyone a 7 out of 10 and have done with it.
So, Alex, should we move on? It's the championship. What are your thoughts about Blues in the championship and how they're going to get on?
Excited. Obviously, we all know that a lot of the squad that were brought in last summer were brought in ostensibly to make the jump to the championship.
Yeah,
no doubt about that. There's that never fall in love with a lone player aspect to all of this. What happens with the 3 Rangers players we got? I know we didn't see that much of Scott Wright, but Dowell and Davis, particularly Dowell in these last few weeks, has shown real good quality. I don't know whether they would be persuaded to stay on, either as a permanent addition or another loan season. We've got Neumann coming in from Hanover at the back already. That deal's been done. Just minor tinkering, I think, boys. Minor tinkering with what we've got, with some quality additions. And I think that a top half finish and potentially a promotion spot is most certainly not beyond us. The perceived wisdom is that the championship season just gone has been pretty weak, where you look at Bristol City, who were 22 points behind Sheffield United, but equally only 22 points above Plymouth at the bottom. So that mid-table, there's been so many disappointing sides in the championship this year. Norwich, Watford, West Bromwich Albion, to name but three, of whom you would have expected much more. Maybe they'll come again next season and make it a much tougher division. But it's not beyond us to be top half, I don't think. Not beyond us at all. And to maybe have a say in the promotion shake-up. Why not have that ambition? Why not have that self-belief?
Yeah, I think they do clearly have that ambition. And then Brian and I have been engrossed in this little detail over the last couple of days that there could only be 3 teams in the Championship next season still receiving parachute payments. Obviously, if Sheffield United go up, because Leeds, Burnley have exited the league, Luton have gone down. So it'll just be the 3 teams coming down that are getting those payments. And Tom Wagner has suggested that Blues will be able to compete with parachute payment teams this season. So it feels like the door is open for teams in the Championship this season. Teams like Blues, who, if they can put a decent squad together and put a run together and start the season well, most importantly, can actually compete this year.
We are at another crux here, in the same way that we were when we won the League Cup in 2011. We all talked about that as being the end of the beginning. What it actually was the beginning of the end, because we were relegated a couple of months later, and we all know what's happened in the ensuing years. So it feels like that we're at the end of the beginning again here at this point, going into this summer. But given the way that Knighthead have run things this season, with the investment they've made, with the calm hand they've kept on the tiller, with the work that Craig Gardner has done, regaining Cap 1 status for the academy, I think is a huge feather in our cap, so that we can also look to try to develop more players from within, as well as going out into the marketplace. All fans love that. There's not a fan of any club that doesn't love one of their own coming through, even if it's only once every so often, as we have with Jude, like we did with Nathan Redmond and Jordan Much maybe before, and people like that. So Darren Carter. So the building blocks are definitely in place, so that the Carson Young empire was clearly built on sand, and it soon became apparent that that was the case. With this ownership group, I have supreme confidence of the building blocks that they put in place, so that we can only keep getting better as we move towards the ultimate aim of getting back into the top flight.
I feel like it's a great chance for Blues this coming season. They've obviously got a lot of the players who will be part of their 11 and squad next season already. I think with 5 more starting signings, then there could maybe be a genuine force, and hopefully Sheffield United do go out of the league, because that will take up one of those top 6 spots, won't it?
Yeah, they're a good side, Sheffield United, and players like Harmer and O'Hare were really, and Harrison Burrows were such good signings for them to complement what they had. The only problem Sheffield United have is that they're a month behind Leeds and Burnley in terms of knowing what their ultimate destiny is, and I'm sure they've got either or budgets and targets depending on which division they end up in, similar to Sunderland and Coventry, who are going to play tonight as we speak in their second leg. So, Leicester interests me in terms of, are the EFL going to come down hard on them again for financial problems that they've had? Southampton need to refocus quickly and get a manager in that can get them concentrated. Who's the other team that's gone down?
Ipswich.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to be wary of Ipswich Town. I think Kieran McKenna may well stick around. They're going to lose players like Delap. That much is clear. But I think, much like when we got relegated, was it 2007 we went down and a lot of that squad stuck around? I think we might see the same with Ipswich, and that continuity might just help them, get back at the first attempt. So I think we need to be wary of Ipswich and Kieran McKenna. But yeah, you're right. What you're saying, there's nothing to fear. There's nothing to absolutely pan yourself about going into that division. And that's the problem we have for the past 7 or 8 years of our championship status before relegation. We were fearful. Yeah. And fear football was played by a succession of managers. Karanka's football, the shrug the shoulders football, Steve Cottrell's football. It wasn't great to watch. It didn't stir the blood, did it? So to be in this position now where you've got Peck and Iwata in central midfield, potential for Clara and Neumann, I guess, as first choice centre-halves for next season, Buchanan to come back and push for a left-back berth, Laird, who's got better and better as the season's gone on, Stansfield, May, Williamson, Doubt, Anderson. I want to see what Anderson's like at championship level. Can he make that step up? It's so great to have seen Keshi get through a season without serious injury or being out for a period of time, and hasn't that shown in his consistency in performance? Just those names trip off the tongue as names as part of a collective and a squad that now has had a year playing together, and with some clever additions here and there, the continuity and the chemistry should still be right that Birmingham can push on.
Yeah, indeed. And you think that you have more faith in the recruitment staff and the scouting that's gone into this, and the data that's will be behind whatever signings they make this season. I
mean, you look at all the signings that we made, and you're never going to get everyone 100% correct. There's no club in the world that gets every single signing right. Sir Alex Ferguson's bought some duffers in the past. Kleberson, Eric Jemba, to name but two, as players that were much vaunted and came to Manchester United and didn't really achieve a great deal. So you've got to allow any manager, director of football, however the system works at a club, a bit of leeway and a bit of margin for error. But I don't see that Craig Gardner's made many errors in terms of identifying the areas and suggesting players, and the scouting network. Generally, I think scouting in this country is in an absolutely lamentable state. It's in the worst state I can ever remember, where clubs are now so lazy that Victor Gyökeres has to score a hatful of goals at Coventry and then go to Sporting Lisbon and score a hatful of goals there before the Premier League clubs actually realise, oh, wait a minute, he's all right. Maybe we should go and spend 100 million on him. Well, you could have paid 10 million for him 2 years ago if you'd had the brains to actually go and scout him. But no, they wait until it's, they can lavish millions upon, a club because they've left it too late. Scouting needs to improve in this country. But I think generally the scouting we've done, come on, who knew who William Williamson was? I didn't. No. I didn't know much about Pek Seung-ho when he came in. Iwata, I had a vague idea because he'd been at Celtic. But no, we can't all pretend to, oh, yeah, I know all about William Williamson. Yeah. No, Emil Hansen, that sort of stuff. No, that judgment has borne out to be really good judgment. And let's hope that continues. Because you've now got to find that next level of player who not only can make the jump from League One to Championship, but you've got to think, right, we've got to find players that can be Premier League ready. And whether that means you have to find off-the-peg Premier League experience quality, or whether you take a punt on somebody who you think can turn into a Premier League player, that's always a very difficult thing to juggle for, recruitment teams and things like that. But I've got faith in them.
Yeah, brilliant. Ian, thank you very, very much for your time. Really interesting to hear your experiences as a Blues fan and a broadcaster. and a musician. We didn't get to the music. You only dropped one musical metaphor in there, didn't you?
We did.
Really appreciate your time, Alex. Thank you very much for your time as ever. And goes without saying, thank you all for listening and watching as well. It's a keep right on from all three of us.